The vampire king saw her bruises, and his mercy turned to fury. The kingdom of Valarian lay under a sky that never fully embraced the sun. Twilight lingered like a heavy curtain, and the wind carried whispers of old curses. In this land, mortals and immortals walked the same streets, but few dared to meet the eyes of the vampire nobility. Their rule was absolute, and rumors of their power were enough to silence even the bravest hearts. In the small northern village, at the edge of the kingdom's forests, a young noblewoman named Elara moved carefully through the moonlit garden of her family estate. Her steps were quiet, almost hesitant, as if she feared even the shadows might betray her. Her dresses, though rich in color and fabric, hung loosely on her frame. Her arms and shoulders bore hidden marks, faint bruises that told stories she could not speak aloud.
Elara's heart ached every time she thought of her stepfather.
He was a man who desired control over everything. Her inheritance, her mother's estate, even her own life. Each day was a trial of endurance. Yet tonight something made her leave her chambers. Perhaps it was the stillness of the garden, the way the night seemed to breathe secrets. Or perhaps it was hope, a tiny stubborn flame that refused to die. The tree swayed, their twisted branches like the fingers of spirits, reaching down. Elara paused near the marble fountain, its waters reflecting the dim light of the twin moons. She leaned over, letting the cold spray touch her face. "Why must the world be so cruel?" she whispered, though no one could hear. A sudden sound broke her solitude, a movement behind the hedges. Her breath caught, and her fingers instinctively tightened around the hem of her dress. From the darkness a tall figure emerged, moving with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. His eyes glowed faintly in the night, pale and sharp, like moonlight trapped in crystal. King Valerian. He was known across Olarian as the Vampire King, a ruler feared for centuries. Tales of his fury traveled faster than the wind. It was said that no one could withstand his anger and live. And yet, in that quiet garden standing before her, he looked different. "Why do you wander here alone, child of a fragile house?" His voice was smooth, deep, carrying the weight of centuries. It made her shiver. I just wanted air," she stammered, trying to mask her fear with calm. She lowered her gaze, aware that her bruised arms could be seen if she moved the wrong way. He studied her quietly, and for a long moment the night held its breath. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. "I see your pain," he said, his voice softer now, but it carried an edge that made her heart race. "And I do not forgive cruelty in my kingdom, not even against those under your own roof." Elara's eyes widened. No one ever spoke of her suffering in that way. Her stepfather's hand had always seemed untouchable, his authority absolute. And now, this stranger, this fearsome king, seemed to understand her torment. "You, bad. You would punish him?" she asked, her voice trembling. Valerian's gaze darkened.
"I would.
"But first, I will offer protection to those who cannot protect themselves." He gestured to the looming castle at the edge of the forest, its walls black as night and crowned with towers that pierced the clouds. "Come with me. Tonight, you need not fear." She had heard stories of the Vampire King, how he could crush a human with a thought.
Yet beneath that fear, a spark of hope grew.
Perhaps she might finally escape the cruel grasp of her stepfather. Perhaps she might finally breathe without trembling. She followed him, her steps tentative but determined. The forest was thick and alive with whispers. Breath. Shadows danced among the twisted trunks, and every sound made her heart leap. But Valerian walked with certainty, a predator in control of every movement, yet somehow in that control she found a strange comfort. When they reached the castle, the gates opened silently, as though they recognized him. He did not speak as he led her through the dimly lit halls. Candles flickered along the walls, their flames revealing paintings of vampire kings and queens, frozen in time yet alive in their piercing gazes. "This is where you will stay," Valerian said, finally stopping before a chamber that was both grand and welcoming. Heavy velvet curtains blocked the moonlight, and a soft carpet muffled the sound of footsteps. "Oh, one may harm you here without my knowledge. You will be safe." Elara's voice caught in her throat. "Safe? Truly?" His eyes softened, but only slightly. "Safe from those who would seek to harm you." "But the world outside these walls is still cruel." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to plead for mercy for those she left behind, but the weight of the moment silenced her. Days passed, and Elara began to notice the strange rhythms of the castle. Servants moved in silence, as though afraid to breathe too loudly. Guards patrolled with eyes sharp as blades, but none dared approach her without Valerian's signal. Even then, their reverence was tinged with fear. Valerian himself remained a constant presence, sometimes watching her from afar, sometimes appearing suddenly, as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves. Best, his attention was unnerving, yet she could not deny the pull she felt. He was both terrifying and mesmerizing. She longed to understand him, to see behind the mask of the ruthless king. One evening, as the twin moons hung low, Valerian appeared in the chamber without warning. He carried a silver tray with a small meal. "You must eat," he said simply, placing it before her. His eyes lingered on her bruises, now fading but still visible. I am not used to such care," she admitted quietly. He tilted his head. "Oh, stop it. Bet you not. But you are not most." His gaze lingered on her face, searching, probing. "You have endured much, and yet you remain strong. Brit. I do what I must. There is no other choice." "And yet," Valerian said softly, almost to himself, "strength without guidance can be broken. Mercy without action can be wasted." "I will not allow either to happen to you." That night, sleep came fitfully. Her dreams were haunted by shadows and whispers. She saw her stepfather's cruel smile, her bruises multiplying, the world spinning out of control. But Proust. And then she saw Valerian, towering, cold, but reaching a hand toward her, a promise of protection that was both frightening and comforting. When she awoke, the sunlight, or what passed for sunlight in Ilarian, was faint and silver. The castle was quiet, but she sensed him watching her from the shadows. She felt exposed and seen in a way she had never experienced before. Later in the library she discovered rows of ancient books, their pages filled with stories of kings, curses, and battles that spanned centuries. Valerian entered quietly, noticing her curiosity. "Do you wish to know the truths of this kingdom?" he asked. "Yes," she breathed, "all of it."
He smiled faintly, a ghost of warmth in his stern face.
"Power, child. But beware! Truth can be heavier than any chains you have known." As he spoke, a chill seemed to settle over the room, and she noticed a mark on his wrist, a dark, intricate seal that pulsed faintly, as if alive. She froze, curiosity and fear clashing within her. What is that?" she asked. Valerian's eyes darkened, and for the first time, she saw a shadow cross his expression.
A burden, he said slowly. One that has lasted centuries.
One that will only end in fire or blood.
Elara felt a shiver run through her.
Brave had endured so much pain, but the sight of that mark made her heart clench. There was more to him than power, more than anger. There was pain, and perhaps a need for redemption. The night deepened, and the castle seemed to breathe with them. Outside, the garden awaited, silent and mysterious. Inside, the two of them were connected by unspoken truths, by shared pain, by fragile hope, and by the unsteady beginnings of trust. And yet, even as she felt a spark of something new, a warning lingered in the back of her mind. The world beyond the castle walls was not forgiving, and those who had hurt her were still free. The stepfather's cruelty, the whispers of the village, and the unseen forces in the shadows, none of it had ended. Valerian's hand brushed the edge of her sleeve as he left the room, and she felt the weight of his gaze on her back. He was not just a protector. He was a force she could neither tame nor ignore. The pull between them was undeniable, yet it was laced with tension, with power, and with danger. Great. And somewhere deep within, Elara knew that her life had changed forever. She was no longer alone, yet she was not yet safe. In the silence of the castle, as the twin moons cast pale light across the walls, a question hung in the air.
What price would she pay for mercy, and what fury might it awaken? The castle of the Vampire King was a labyrinth of stone halls and shadowed corridors.
Each room whispered of centuries past, of victories won, and betrayals that had left scars deeper than any wound. Elara moved through its corridors with a mixture of awe and fear. Though she had walked its halls for days now, she still felt as though the shadows themselves were watching her. Valerian rarely spoke during these walks, breath. When he did, his voice was quiet, but carried the weight of authority.
"Do not wander alone,"
he said one evening, his pale eyes catching hers. "The night is full of dangers you cannot yet see."
She understood that danger was more than just her stepfather, or the rogue humans who might wish her harm. The kingdom itself was a place where magic and darkness walked hand in hand. And Valerian, though protector, was a force she could neither predict nor control. Despite the fear, a strange bond was forming between them. Valerian's presence was oppressive, yes, but also protective. There were moments, brief and fleeting, where he allowed himself to soften. Once, in the library, he had explained a page from an ancient tome to her, tracing a finger along the faded letters.
"You see," he said, "knowledge is not just power."
Right. It is the only way to survive in a world that forgets mercy. Elara had watched him then, noticing how carefully he moved, how much he valued understanding, even in the midst of his cruelty to enemies.
And though she would never say it aloud, she began to feel a spark of trust, perhaps even hope.
But shadows lingered. One evening, as the twin moons cast pale light across the castle gardens, a servant whispered something that made Valerian's expression harden. Elara had been walking among the marble statues, the cool night air brushing against her skin. She noticed his change before he spoke. "There is a sorceress," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "One who seeks power beyond reason. She has cursed those I care for before. Now she has marked your house." "Your stepfather is only her pawn." Elara's stomach tightened. Cursed? My stepfather. He is cruel, yes. But why would a sorceress care for him? Valerian's eyes were sharp. Because cruelty breeds weakness, and weakness can be twisted. He serves her because he seeks power he cannot claim himself. But her magic, it reaches further than any man's hand. The words sank deep, but Elora realized that her suffering was not just personal. It was part of a larger, darker web, one she had only just begun to glimpse. Over the next days, Valerian became more attentive. He instructed her in the ways of the castle, in self-defense, and in recognizing subtle signs of magic. He did not coddle her. Instead, he guided her through the dangers, testing her courage and her resolve. One afternoon, he led her to the training hall, a vast chamber with walls of obsidian and floors of polished stone. "You must learn to protect yourself," he said. "Not just from men, but from magic, from shadows, from those who would twist your life into a nightmare." But she had never held a weapon before. The sword Valerian placed in her hands felt heavy, unnatural. But under his watchful eyes, she practiced. Each movement was slow at first, then gradually more confident. And as her strength grew, so did a new sense of power, a quiet courage she had not known she possessed. Valerian observed her silently, occasionally correcting a stance or adjusting her grip. Yet there were moments when his gaze lingered longer than necessary, as if he were measuring her not just for skill but for something deeper. "You are stronger than you know," he said one evening as they left the training hall. But the air was cold, carrying the scent of distant forests. "And yet, strength alone will not save you. Wisdom and heart." Bow. Elara looked at him, unsure whether he spoke to guide her or to remind himself of something he had forgotten. There was a tension between them, a push and pull of unspoken feelings. She was drawn to him, though she knew the danger of such attachment. He was a king, a predator, and centuries older than her. Yet in his presence, she felt alive in ways she had never imagined.
As the days passed, signs of the curse became clearer.
The servants whispered of shadows that moved against the wind, of strange symbols appearing and disappearing on walls, and of creatures that prowled just beyond sight. Valerian grew more distant at times, his mind heavy with thoughts he refused to share. One night, Elara could no longer contain her curiosity. She had seen the mark on his wrist pulsing faintly in the moonlight, and she needed answers. Breath. "What is that mark?" she asked, keeping her voice low as they walked through the quiet halls. Valerian froze. His hand moved to cover the seal, but she caught sight of it again. Dark, intricate, and alive with faint movement. "It is a curse," he said finally. "An ancient binding placed upon me centuries ago. It ties me to a destiny I did not choose." Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. "A curse? What kind of destiny?" He shook his head, his expression unreadable. "One that may require sacrifice. One that may demand that I bring ruin to those I care for if I fail." Her heart tightened. She realized then that the danger she faced was far greater than her stepfather or the rogue sorceress. Valerian himself was bound by forces older than the kingdom. And yet, despite the fear, she felt a strange determination.
If he bore such a burden, she wanted to help him carry it.
The next morning, Valerian led her to a hidden chamber beneath the castle. The walls were lined with ancient scrolls and books, their pages filled with knowledge of magic, curses, and the history of the vampire kings. "Breaths. You must understand," he said, "that knowledge is your first weapon. The curse I bear is tied to bloodlines, to power, and to choices made long ago. To face it, you must be ready for the truth. Elara listened intently, absorbing every word. For she learned of the sorceress, a powerful being who thrived on chaos, and of the delicate balance between humans and vampires. Each revelation was both terrifying and enlightening. She began to see her own suffering in a new light, not as weakness, but as preparation for something far greater. Days turned into weeks. Elara trained, studied, and learned to navigate the complexities of the vampire court. She gained confidence, though the shadows of fear never fully left her. And all the while Valerian watched, sometimes silently, sometimes guiding, always a constant presence. One evening, as the moons hung low, a servant arrived with a message that made both their hearts tighten. "Brace. The sorceress has moved closer," the servant whispered. "She has cursed the northern villages. Breaths. Your stepfather. He has grown bolder." Valerian's eyes darkened. "Then the time is coming," he said.
You must be ready, not just for him, but for her.
For the curse. For everything that follows. Elara's hands trembled, but her resolve hardened. She had endured suffering, fear, and uncertainty, yet now, standing beside the vampire king, she felt a spark of courage she had never known. That night, she sat in her chamber, thinking of the steps ahead. She realized that her life was no longer her own. She was part of something larger, a web of power, magic, and destiny. And at the center of it stood Valerian, the man she feared, admired, and perhaps already cared for more than she should. She looked to the moonlight, falling softly across the floor. The castle was quiet, yet she felt the pulse of its ancient heart. Somewhere, in the darkness, the sorceress moved closer, her shadow stretching like a threat across the land. And somewhere, Valerian wrestled with the curse that bound him, unaware that his own heart was beginning to change. Elara understood one thing clearly. The path ahead would be dangerous. The sorceress was relentless, her magic cruel and cunning, and the mark on Valerian's wrist was a reminder that even he was not free from fate. Yet, even in the shadow of danger, a fragile hope bloomed. Together, they might face what was coming. Together, they might survive. Perhaps, just perhaps, they might find something neither had ever known. Trust, courage, and a bond that could defy even the darkest of curses. But the night was far from over. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, a whisper of movement reached her ears. She opened her eyes to see the shadows in her room stretching unnaturally, curling toward her. But chill ran through the chamber, and the air seemed heavier than before. From the darkness, a faint, otherworldly voice called her name. "Dad!" "Elara." She froze, heart hammering. Outside, the castle walls remained silent, yet the whisper came again, closer this time, like the wind itself had taken shape. Valerian appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide and pale in the moonlight. He took a step forward, and she felt both fear and comfort in his presence. "Bah!" "They know you are here," he said quietly. "The sorceress knows you exist. And she will come."
Elara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of what was coming.
The castle, the king, the curse, and her own courage, they were all about to be tested. And as the shadow in the room deepened, the words of the vampire king echoed in her mind. "You must be ready for the night that will decide everything." The castle had never felt more alive or more dangerous. Shadows stretched long across the stone corridors, and the faint scent of iron and night-blooming flowers hung in the air. Elara moved quietly beside Valerian, her hands trembling slightly, but her steps determined. Breath. Tonight, they would leave the safety of the castle walls. Tonight, they would face the darkness together.
Valerian had made the decision. The sorceress was no longer content with whispers or distant threats.
Hey! She had cursed the northern villages, using fear and magic to extend her influence. If left unchecked, her power could shatter the fragile peace between humans and vampires and destroy all who stood in her way. "You must remain close to me," Valerian said as they prepared to depart. His voice carried its usual authority, but beneath it, Elara sensed something else. Fear. A shadow he did not fully understand. "I will," she replied, trying to steady her own racing heart. They moved through the hidden passageways beneath the castle, corridors lit by pale lanterns that seemed almost to float in the air. The walls were lined with ancient carvings, scenes of kings and queens, battles, and rituals long forgotten. Elara ran her fingers over the cool stone, feeling the weight of centuries beneath her touch.
"Why do you walk these paths?" she asked quietly. "Do you ever fear what lies in the shadows?"
"I am the shadows," he said, "and yet even I fear what I cannot control." The words chilled her, but she sensed the truth in them. For all his power, Valerian was not invincible. He carried burdens that stretched back centuries, and tonight, those burdens would walk with them into the forest. The northern forest awaited, dark and silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Legends told of spirits that roamed these woods, of beasts that preyed on travelers, and of magic that twisted reality itself. But Elara did not falter. She had trained under Valerian's watchful eye, learned to move silently, to trust her instincts, and to steel herself against fear. Psst. They walked for hours, the moonlight barely breaking through the thick canopy above. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, and a sense of unseen eyes followed their every step. Elara's heart pounded in her chest, yet she refused to show it. She would not give fear the power to control her. Finally, they reached the edge of a clearing, and there, in the center, a strange light glowed. It pulsed like a heartbeat, casting long, twisting shadows across the trees. The air hummed with magic, heavy and oppressive, and Elara felt a chill creep along her spine. "The sorceress is near," Valerian whispered. "We must proceed carefully." Elara nodded. Her hands were steady now, her courage bolstered by the presence of the man beside her. For the first time, she felt that she could face whatever awaited them. A sudden movement caught her eye, a figure, barely visible, darting between the trees. Valerian's hand moved instinctively to his side, and the shadow seemed to react, recoiling as if aware of his presence. The figure stepped into the light, and Elara gasped. The sorceress was taller than she had imagined, her cloak flowing like liquid shadow. Her eyes gleamed with a cruel intelligence, and her smile was both beautiful and terrifying. "So, the child comes," she said, her voice like silk over steel.
"And the vampire king follows. How predictable."
Valerian stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the sorceress. "Leave them out of this," he said. Breath. His voice was calm, but beneath it there was an edge of fury that made the air itself seem to tighten. The sorceress laughed, a sound that carried through the clearing like a knife.
"Out of this? Oh, king, you misunderstand."
"This has everything to do with her, with you, with the balance of this world." She had never seen Valerian this tense. He was a king, a predator, yet here he was, facing a force he could not fully predict. And yet, he did not falter. "You have chosen your path," Valerian said slowly. "I have chosen mine. Leave now, or face the consequences." The sorceress's eyes glinted.
Consequences?
"Do you understand the curse you bear, Vampire King? Do you understand what will happen if she refuses?" Elara's stomach tightened. She realized then that the danger was not only for Valerian, but for her as well. Her life, her choices, and perhaps even her heart would play a role in this conflict. Valerian's gaze met hers, and in that moment she saw the truth. His fury was not just anger, it was protection, care, and a fear he did not wish to admit. He would do anything to keep her safe, even if it meant facing the darkest corners of his own soul. The sorceress raised her hands, and the forest seemed to shift. Shadows moved like living creatures, twisting toward them with sharp edges. The wind howled, carrying whispers in a language Elara could not understand. But Valerian did not move. Rasp. He stood firm, his presence anchoring her. "Stay close," he whispered. "Pain." Elara nodded, feeling the heat of his energy through the space between them. It was not just power. It was an unspoken bond, a promise of safety in a world that had offered so little. The sorceress struck, sending waves of dark magic toward them. Valerian moved like liquid, his form blurring as he deflected each attack. Elara watched, awestruck, as he became a force of both fury and precision. But even as he protected her, she knew they could not withstand this forever. Gathering her courage, Elara stepped forward. She remembered the lessons he had taught her. Focus, balance, trust. Drawing on her own strength, she reached for the glowing amulet around her neck, a charm Valerian had given her for protection. The moment her fingers touched it, a surge of warmth spread through her, and the shadows recoiled as if afraid of her resolve. The sorceress's eyes widened. "What?" she murmured, taking a step back.
Valerian glanced at Elara, a mixture of surprise and pride in his eyes. "You have learned well," he said.
"But we are not yet done." The battle continued, the clearing alive with energy, the trees swaying as though the forest itself were holding its breath. Shadows clashed with light, magic against magic, will against will. And in the center, two hearts beat together, not as predator and prey, not as king and human, but as allies, as partners facing the storm. As the night deepened, the sorceress grew more desperate.
"You cannot defeat me!" she shouted. "You do not understand the full power of the curse!"
Valerian's eyes darkened. "Perhaps not," he admitted. "But I understand what matters most. Her courage, her heart, and I will not let you harm her." For a moment, the forest was silent, the tension so thick it felt like the air itself might tear. Then the sorceress moved again, faster than the eye could follow, aiming a spell directly at Elara. Valerian reacted instantly, stepping in front of her, but something unexpected happened. The curse on his wrist flared, sending a wave of energy that threatened to knock both of them back. Elara felt a surge of fear and determination. She reached out, placing her hand over his wrist, and a strange warmth spread between them. The sorceress faltered, her spell breaking. Breaths. "No, this cannot be," she whispered. Valerian's eyes met hers, and in that gaze Elara saw centuries of pain, anger, and longing. His fury had been transformed by her courage, his mercy tempered by their bond. He had always been the shadows, the predator, the king, but now he was more. He was her protector, her companion, her mirror. But the victory was fleeting. The sorceress's laugh echoed through the forest, cold and cruel. "This changes nothing," she said. "You may have survived tonight, but the curse is not broken. Not yet."
And soon, everything will come at you all at once.
Valerian's eyes narrowed, and Elara felt a chill run through her. The night was far from over. They had faced the sorceress and survived, but she had left a warning and a threat. They retreated into the forest, hearts pounding, minds racing. Elara looked at Valerian, realizing that her feelings for him had deepened beyond fear or admiration. She cared for him, though the weight of their situation made her reluctant to admit it even to herself. Valerian, in turn, had begun to trust her courage, her determination, her heart. He had always ruled with power and fear, but now he saw another kind of strength, quiet, persistent, and luminous. As the castle appeared in the distance, the first light of the twin moons fading, a sense of uneasy calm settled over them, but the sorceress's shadow lingered, stretching far beyond what they could see. And somewhere in the hidden corners of the forest, the whisper of her magic promised that the true test was yet to come. Elara felt a hand brush against hers, and she looked up to see Valerian's eyes softening, though still filled with determination. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we prepare."
The sorceress will not wait, and neither can we.
Elara nodded, understanding that the path ahead would be dangerous, and that their bond, tested by magic, shadows, and courage, was now the only thing that could protect them.
And as the forest faded behind them and the castle grew near, a question remained in the air. How far would they go to face the curse, and what would it demand from their hearts? The castle of Ilarion seemed unusually quiet that night.
Even the shadows appeared hesitant, as if they too were holding their breath. Elara stood at the edge of the courtyard, her cloak pulled tight around her shoulders, and stared into the darkened forest beyond.
She could feel the pull of magic, heavy and insistent, tugging at her chest. Valerian approached silently, his presence a steadying force. The pale light of the twin moons reflected off his dark robes, and his eyes, glowing faintly, held a mixture of fury and care.
"Are you ready?"
he asked. His voice was calm, but Elara could sense the weight of centuries pressing down on him. She nodded. "I am. We face this together." Oration. He studied her for a long moment. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said softly. "It is the choice to move forward despite it. Remember that, and you will survive what comes next." Every rustle of leaves sounded like a warning, every shadow a lurking threat. They moved carefully side by side, Valerian's hand occasionally brushing hers, not by accident but as a silent reminder that they were not alone. The clearing they had entered before lay ahead, bathed in an eerie glow. At its center stood the sorceress, her cloak flowing like liquid darkness, eyes sharp with malice. Bration. She had anticipated their arrival, her smile both cruel and confident.
"You return," she said, her voice like silk over steel.
"Bold, but foolish. You cannot defeat me." "You do not even understand the curse."
Valerian stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the sorceress.
His presence was commanding. Yet there was a softness when he looked at her, a silent promise of protection.
Elara swallowed her fear and stepped closer.
Breath.
"We understand enough,"
she said firmly. We know what matters most.
We know that courage and heart are stronger than fear and cruelty. The sorceress's laugh rang out, echoing through the forest.
You speak as if words can protect you. You are nothing but children playing at power.
But Elara did not falter. She reached for the charm around her neck, the one Valerian had given her. Its warmth spread through her fingers, filling her with a strange, steadying energy.
She felt a connection between herself and Valerian, between courage and action, between hope and resolve.
The sorceress struck first. Waves of dark energy surged through the clearing, bending trees and twisting shadows into jagged shapes. Valerian moved instantly, deflecting the first attacks with precise movements that made him appear almost otherworldly. Elara stayed close, letting him guide her through the chaos, her own hands glowing faintly with the warmth of the charm. "You are stronger than I thought," the sorceress hissed. "But strength alone will not save you."
Elara realized then that this was not just a test of power. It was a test of trust. If she faltered, if she let fear take hold, Valerian could be destroyed along with her.
She took a deep breath, centering herself, and met the sorceress's gaze. "I will not falter," she said, her voice steady. "Not while he stands with me." Valerian glanced at her, his eyes filled with admiration and something deeper, something unspoken, a connection forged in shared struggle and mutual understanding.
Do not let your fear control you, he said quietly.
Together they moved as one. Valerian deflected the sorceress's attacks while Elara used the charm to shield them both. The waves of dark magic crashed around them, but their bond created a protective circle. The forest seemed to hum in response, ancient magic stirring at the courage of two hearts united. The sorceress recoiled, surprised. "Impossible!" she shouted. "Breaths. No mortal can wield such power."
Elara felt the warmth of the charm surge stronger, pulsing through her veins. It was as if the courage, trust, and love she felt for Valerian amplified the magic around them.
She realized then that the curse, though powerful, was not only about destruction, it was about testing the heart.
Valerian's fury, once dangerous and uncontrolled, had transformed.
He no longer fought, only with strength and fear, but with purpose and care. Each move was precise, each step measured, and when their hands brushed again, the surge of connection amplified their power, bending the shadows back, forcing the sorceress to retreat. You defy destiny!" she screamed, stepping back. "This cannot be!" Valerian's voice cut through the chaos, calm yet commanding. "Destiny is not a chain, sorceress. It is a path, and one can choose to walk it differently. Bert, I choose mercy. I choose protection, and I choose her."
Elara felt her heart swell.
She had never seen him speak with such clarity, such purpose. The man who had once been a creature of fury and shadows now stood as a king not just of power, but of choice. The sorceress, realizing her spells were failing, attempted one final attack, sending a wave of darkness toward them both. Without hesitation, Elara stepped forward, placing the charm directly in the path of the wave, pushing back the shadows, and a sound like wind through the mountains filled the clearing. The sorceress shrieked, stepping back, her cloak twisting violently. For a moment the forest was silent. Then, with a final glare, she vanished, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and magic in the air. Valerian exhaled deeply, his body relaxing for the first time in what seemed like centuries. He turned to Elara, a faint smile on his lips. Breath.
You have done more than survive. You have changed the course of fate itself. Elara's legs shook, but she smiled back. We did it. Together. They stood in the clearing,
the twin moons reflecting on the still waters of a nearby stream. The forest, though scarred by magic, felt lighter. The shadows no longer threatened, and the oppressive weight that had lingered for days seemed to lift. Valerian reached out, taking her hand gently.
You have courage beyond your years, Alara, and more than that, you have a heart that refuses to break.
Elora looked into his eyes, feeling a warmth that went beyond the moonlight.
And you?
She said softly.
Have learned that even kings need trust and care? For a long moment, they simply stood together, hands entwined, hearts beating in quiet unison.
The trials they had faced had changed them both. Valerian's fury had been tempered by mercy, his centuries of pain softened by connection. Elara's courage had been tested, her resolve strengthened, and her heart had found a companion in the most unexpected place: breath. The journey back to the castle was quiet, but filled with a new understanding. Every shadow seemed less threatening, every whisper less ominous. They had faced darkness together and emerged stronger. Back in the castle, Valerian led Elara to the highest tower, a place where the world could be seen in all its glory. The walls were lined with ancient tapestries, telling stories of kings and queens, of battles fought and won, of curses broken and lessons learned.
You see, he said, gazing out over the kingdom, even in the darkest times, there is light.
Even in the deepest shadows, there is hope. Elora nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had endured so much pain, so much fear, yet now she understood the power of choice, of courage, and of trust. And she understood, perhaps for the first time, that love and care could be as powerful as any sword or spell. They remained there long into the night, watching the horizon where the first hints of dawn began to appear. The world was not perfect. The kingdom still held dangers, but the fear that had gripped her for so long had been replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging.
Valerian turned to her, his eyes softening.
The curse has ended, but the lessons remain. You have taught me that mercy and strength can coexist, that trust and courage are not weaknesses, but the greatest power of all.
Elara smiled, feeling tears prick at her eyes.
And you have taught me that even those who seem untouchable, even those who seem beyond hope, can change. That even kings, with all their fury, can choose love and care.
They stood together, the kingdom spread before them, the night slowly giving way to morning.